Hey everybody. So I made templates for rolled handles, and I'm going to show in this video how I use them. So the handles that I made in this instance are going to be used with a 1-inch connector, and I'm going to use rectangle rings to show how to work it. And I'm using just the two end pieces of the template. They're going to come with extensions to make the handle longer. In this configuration, the handle is approximately 10 inches, and then when you add the extension pieces, you end up with approximately 22 inches. The template is also going to include two outside pieces where you can use 3/4 inch rings or bridges or whatever you're going to use to connect your handles to your bag. So in this video, I'm going to use the 1-inch rings. So I already cut out my piece and I interfaced it. This vinyl was a little thin, so I interfaced it with a heavy woven interfacing. I also added some ribbon to the fold area so that way it helps alleviate the stress, and I attached that with some double-sided tape. I placed some marks on both ends of the connector or the handle. They match up to the marks that are on the template. So the first thing I did is I added my fold line because that's the place where the connector is going to attach. And then I added some marks. These marks are the initial stitch lines. So I added them to the back side. Not important, but it is more important to add them to the front, because when you fold the handle over and after you attach it, you need to make 1-inch stitches here, 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 and here to attach the connector to your handle. But I made them, it was easier for me to mark them on this side and then just transfer them to the other side. And you do the same thing on the other side. So both sides of the handles have the markings as we need them. So the first step in putting the handle together is to glue your edges, and you're just going to put a little bit of glue in between these marks on all four in all four places. So we don't really want to put any glue in this area where between these two marks where the fold is, because that's how your strap connector is going to be able to move a little bit if you need it to. So I don't really put any glue in the middle, but I am going to put the glue between these two marks and these two marks on all four edges. And I like to use contact cement. I find that contact cement adheres the best to my work. I know some people don't like the smell. It doesn't really bother me that much. You can use double-sided tape. I just find that double-sided tape is not as strong always, so I prefer to use contact cement. There are other forms of glue that you could use, anything that's going to hold your vinyl together while you're doing this stitching. It's such a small area that just using clips won't work because you're going to end up having some shifting. So you need something that will absolutely hold those pieces where they need to go. And I use, this is an acid brush that I got on Amazon. They come in a pack of, I don't know, 20 or 30, and they're relatively inexpensive. Okay, so we're just going to let that dry for a couple seconds. My contact cement is adhering. It's not quite dry yet, but it's close enough for what I need to do here. And I'm going to attach my connectors to the ends. So just carefully without getting, glue everywhere. Just going to put your connector on and sort of place it in the middle where it belongs. Same thing with the other side. And now the connectors are there. The template is shaped is there are a couple of straight lines. So there's this straight line here, and then there's this straight line here. And we need this line to match up with this line here. Same thing on the bottom on all four sides is we're going to have this straight line match up with this straight line when we attach the glue together. So just keeping my connector out of the way, I am just matching my two lines. And there you go. And that's why I like using contact cement. It's stuck. So go to the other side and there we go. So you can see there's a small pocket in the middle, but the two end pieces are attached. And they'll stay that way. You can put a clip on this end, the other straight line, as well as this one. These get attached later, but for now we can just put you can put the clip here and here, just so that way these the glue doesn't stretch and cause it to form or come undone. So we're going to go ahead and do the same thing on the other side, matching my two straight edges. And then I'll put that clip up here as well. And go to this side. And now we've got our basic shape of our handles. So I'm going to let these adhere for a few seconds. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the handle to my sewing machine, and I am going to stitch from the first line up to the second dot, over to the third dot, and down to the last one. So these two outside dots I'm going to stitch at about 1/4 of a length. I'm going to start out at 1/4 of an inch seam, and I'm going to gradually go into about 3/16 or 1/8 down to this end. I'm going to stitch across here, trying to stay away from my connector, and then I'm going to come from this end here, again about 1/8, 3/16 out to 1/4 of an inch here. You want to make sure you leave long enough tails, because we're going to tie off these two ends once we're done doing the stitching. And as I said, I prefer to use the glue, because once I know that this is attached, I can get rid of these clips, and the clips won't be in my way when I'm doing my sewing. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and start my stitches. And again, leaving long tails. And there you go. So that's one side. Now we're going to go ahead and do the other. Okay, now we're going to stitch the other side. Okay, so there we go. We got our stitches done on both sides. And now we're going to just turn the handle out and pull the threads to the middle. So we're going to pull the threads to the middle, and then we're going to tie them off so that way they end up between these two pieces. All right, so now we'll just go ahead and pull these stitches through. I just use an awl. And just making sure all my stitches come through. Both threads, I should say, come through to the middle. Like that one I missed, but I can pull this one up and then take the awl through the loop and pull it up. I'll just go ahead and tie it in place. All right, so then I like to also just do one final tie. It's not really necessary, but I like to tie the two ends together in the middle. It just really helps me feel comfortable that I'm not cutting too close to my stitch marks, and so that way my stitches won't come undone inadvertently. So it's just a knot that's just a wee bit further away from the edges, and then we'll trim it down. There, we've got the start of a handle. So the next step is to glue. Since I'm using glue, I'm going to coat this entire surface with the contact cement, and I'm also going to glue my cord that I'm going to use. So just quickly slathering this piece with glue. And I want to make sure I get all the way to the ends, because that ensures that I have good adhesion of the glue all the way around. So I'm going to set this aside. So I have my cord. I'm going to be cutting this down. This is just a cotton cord I got from another handbag, but I did find some on Amazon that I'm going to leave a link below. Generally, I like to use 3/8 inch cording. The cording is, which is number 4 cord. Since this handle is going to be about 10 inches, I'm going to cut this cord down to 9 inches. See how it fits? I might end up cutting it down again about 8 inches. Another thing that I like about the cording is that it allows you to flare out your ends and flatten them just a bit, which helps them fill the area that we just sewed. It helps it fill that out, but it's flat as well. So I like to, spread it out just a bit. Not too much, because I don't want to lose the round shape, but I want to flatten this area just a smidge. So that way when the handle's in, this area is just a little bit flatter. And then I'm going to coat this with some contact cement. And now I'm going to place the cord inside the strap can already tell it's just a wee bit long, so I'm going to cut a little bit off on one end. And it was just because I didn't take into consideration the stitching area here. So that cording is going to sit in the center, and I'm just again making sure that I'm about even. And since the strap has contact cement and the cording has contact cement, the two are going to stick together. And then I'm going to tuck the cording into my opening. Again, sort of flattening that down as much as I can. I'm tucking that in there as well. And now my cording is in place. So the next step is, I know it fits, I know it's in there nicely, I know my strap isn't going to really move, and I'm ready to close it up. So the next step is to take, since I already have contact cement in this end, I'm going to take this edge and I'm going to pull it up and have it match this top edge of my handle. And I'll just put a clip in place just to hold it temporarily. I don't need to because I have, again, contact cement. Great stuff. But just to show, see, it's stuck. But we'll hold it in place. A little high, so I'll pull it off. So then the next step after this is to go ahead and sandwich the cord in between my two layers of vinyl. And again, it's all contacted cement, so it's going to attach pretty quickly. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make sure that my two outside edges of the vinyl match up. Go it down as far as you can. Take my clips off, and I'm not really worried about how uneven it looks because I'm going to trim that down anyway. I can make sure I trim it down, and I'll be, if I were going to make these into complete handles, I would edge coat them. So then lastly, I'm going to put a little bit more contact cement, just about a half a. All right, so I had to shorten my cord a bit, and it is now 8 inches long. The strap is going to be about 10 inches, so it's going to give us, a little bit more than an inch on either side. And I'm just spreading this end out a little bit. Just doesn't seem so bulky. And then I'm going to put my cord in the middle of my handle. Shove it in the opening. Use my chopstick to shove it in there a little bit. Okay, and my cord is about equal distance. shut that down a little bit. There we go. I just had to make it a tiny bit shorter. It was still rubbing the edges, so I cut it down just a little bit. All right, so now, again, because it's got all this contact cement in here, it's going to stick together. And then put a little bit more contact cement on here from the opening to the stitch lines. I don't want to go past the stitch lines, but I just want to go close to it. Now the glue is no longer necessary, so I get to toss my acid brush and close up my glue. And I'm going to let this dry for just a second. All right, so now that it's dry, I'm going to go ahead and close these two ends together. I mean, I'm going to put a clip here to help keep them closed. Same thing, just a little bit further on down the line, just to help support it because it's pretty thick with that cording right here. You can make the cording a little bit shorter if you are having trouble being able to stitch this. So I'm just going to let that dry for a second, and as I do that, I am going to use my other pokey tool, and I'm going to use this to press the cord down and press the vinyl to each other, making sure that I'm getting a really nice line, because that's where I want my stitches to go. And I think that's part of the key of getting a nice rolled handle, is getting your stitches as close to that cording as you can. You can use plastic tubing. I just prefer to use the cording because the cording helps. It has a little bit of flexibility and movement in it, and it helps adhere it to the vinyl using the glue. And it keeps it from having gaps. All right. Still keeping everything even as much as possible. It'll hold for what? Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to stitch from this stitch line, the last stitch I made here, all the way down to the last stitch I made here. I am going to be using, I'm going to switch it out right now, but I'm going to be using my 3/8 inch piping foot or welting foot. I think they're, the terms are universal, but I'm going to switch this out, both my inside and my outside, because there's a groove here for the piping to fit on. So it's going to stitch like that, and it's going to keep all of the material where it needs to be, and we're going to be able to go all the way down the line with that. All right, so my machine is set up with my piping foot, and I'm going to try to do this, but of course the camera is right in my way, so sorry if my stitches don't look great, but I don't normally have my camera right in front of me. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to lift up my foot Bring this underneath, and then I want to poke my needle in the hole where I ended last time. I'm going to be right there. And then as you can see, my piping foot is on top, and that's because this first stitch is a little bit outside of the width. But what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be angling the handle so that way it all gets underneath that piping foot. The job here now is to get the stitches to end right at the final stitch we just did. Oh, I think it's just one more stitch. No, we'll make it one more stitch and get it in there. Okay. Okay. So there we have our handle stitched together, and the next thing to do is to tie off these ends, but we're going to tie them off in the middle, and then we're going to poke those ends through. Oh no. All right, so just like before, we're going to pull the stitches apart. I'm going to use my awl to pull my stitches through to the middle, or pull the threads through to the middle. Just like that. Do the same thing on this side. And now all the stitches are in the middle. I'm going to tie it off. So we're going to use the doll needle to hide those stitches. What we do is just thread the needle. There we go. So I got both of my threads through the needle, and then I'm just going to be trying to shove the needle underneath this stitch line. It's tight, but it's doable, and I want to get it underneath because I want to pull the threads through to between the lining here. But I need it to go underneath because otherwise it'll be exposed if it's on top. So I got it through there and then sort of bending it to pull. Okay, it's coming through off the top, but that's okay. That's not a big deal because it's going to get cut off anyway. So got that side, we'll do the same thing to the other. And the next step is to trim off some of this excess. So we're going to be trimming from down this way up to about right there or so. The reason why I want to be able to do that is because we need to trim it down, otherwise you'll have a hard time folding your handles over. Plus it looks sloppy, there's a lot of excess glue. So using my fancy scissors here, first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go straight, and then I'll clean up these ends. Okay. You can use a straight edge if you want, but since I'm going to be edge painting anyway, it's not necessary to, for me to get a straight edge or X-Acto knife or something in there. So it looks pretty decent. I'm pretty happy with the way that looks, and the shape will be really nice as it adheres and forms the way I want. Might cut it down just a little bit more. Okay, and then now it's time to sort of round out and clean out these end pieces. Pretty good. All right, that's pretty decent. And the final step would be to edge paint all of your exposed edges. Prior to putting all of this together, you could edge paint your inside where your connectors are, but I think there's enough flexibility. As long as you're clean, you can still get it in there. You can put some edge painting in there, but in normal case I would normally do that, but I didn't have the edge paint out before I started making this video. So there you go. You've got handle connectors, rolled handle connectors. You can make them any way you like. They will, you can have the edge on the inside. You can have the edge on the outside. You could have the edge to the left. If you're putting your handle on the exterior of the bag, you could have it, of course, on the inside, and you have a nice clean handle. You could decoratively put a rivet here. It's not needed structurally, certainly not on these because I used a lot of glue as usual. But you could put a nice decorative rivet right there, and yeah. And there's the rolled handle using the template.